I declare open this public hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade, Defence Subcommittee, in relation to its inquiry into the Department of Defence Annual Report 2023-24. This hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published on the Committee's website. I now welcome Dr. Alexandra Molloy to give evidence today, to be followed by Major General Mick Ryan, retired, a little later. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the Defence Subcommittee?
Good afternoon, Dr. Alexandra Molloy, Senior Lecturer in Aviation at the University of New South Wales.
Thank you very much. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Can I thank you for your very informative submission to this inquiry? And I now invite you, Ms. Molloy, Dr. Molloy, to make an opening statement before we proceed to discussion.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute to the inquiry into the Department of Defence annual report by the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade. I would like to acknowledge that today I'm providing my personal opinion or any part that is done by my research and doesn't represent the opinion of my organisation that I represent. So the key part to open my remarks, I would like to state the rapid development of technology, uncrewed systems and robotic autonomous systems. Most of my submission is based on this topic as well as on their recommendation that I provide. So rapid advancement in technology offer both opportunity and risk, and it is important that these technologies, robotic autonomous systems, uncrewed systems, they already redefine the ways how, let's say, modern conflicts are fought, but they also represent the threats to the national security at the national level. So the way to prevent and counter these systems is as important as paying attention to the development of the systems. Hence, I do believe that there is a need to continuous innovation and adaptation, as well as the need to develop and keep up the pace of these technologies and tracking what is being done by both countries who are at war, like Ukraine or Middle East, as well as the technologies that are developed by various countries like China. It is important to highlight that there are a number of projects and efforts has been done in this space in Australia. There are strategies, there are some policies, but there is a continuous need to update and to reflect, let's say, the lessons learned from the conflicts, like in Ukraine, and some of the recent strategies where, for example, like a joint strategy was in 2020, so 5 years ago. So definitely this needs to be updated and provided that focus on the importance of these systems. Hence, I do highlight the need to develop and pay attention to a balanced approach of high volume, low cost, as well as low volume, high cost. And it is important to develop centers of excellence in both robotic autonomous systems, uncrewed systems, and counter area systems, let's say, as well as working with our partners under AUKUS Pillar 2, with UK, US, as well as with our partners and with our friends in Ukraine, because they are at the forefront of these technologies, they're leading these technologies, and that cooperation could be quite beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such a succinct overview. Not only do I have your submission, I actually have a copy of your report, which I think is, very, very well timed. Can I just go to some of the voices that you quote in there on page 20 and 26 and 27, and I'll just read this into the record. Determining the future role of drone technology on the battlefield, which you've just opened up. Yes, it's a good read. You quote one of the interviewees, and this is what they say: "We should look at the effectiveness of UAS, but not at the cost alone. If I have to fly 20 drones to hit a target, then it's not $500 a drone, it's 500 by 20. Then we should think about the batteries that have to be charged, the logistic changes required to bring it forward, and the dependencies of that chain. And the biggest problem you have with UAS in the future is conflict is China. Anyone who doesn't think about China and the supply chain doesn't understand the nature of the UAS. And even though we've moved to no Chinese components in the platforms that we make, we're kidding ourselves if we think there's no dependency, whether that's the critical minerals that sit behind it, lithium and the like, or whether that's just the effect of the supply chain. Most of the parts we get come out of Taiwan. While Taiwan's not China today, doesn't mean it won't be China tomorrow." Then he talks about this, she potentially talks about the semiconductor foundries, etc., and goes on. I just thought it ties so many complex, interconnected pieces together into that one comment. What does the committee really need to understand about the ways that the Ukrainian theatre is relevant to the potential Australian theatre of war, and in what ways Australia is different? What lessons do we particularly need to heed from Ukraine, and are there opportunities that we are not seizing?
Right. And as you mentioned, it is just a quote, but it contains so many complex issues that we must pay attention and definitely try to think how this would be reflected and how this will be relevant to Australian context. Something that I would like to highlight first of all is that the low-cost systems and its effect. So currently on the battlefield, these low-cost $500 drones inflict up to 80% of casualties and 60 to 70% of Russian equipment. So it's quite substantial. So, and if 1 or 10 drones miss, so you just lose $5,000 as opposed to $1 million. So the asymmetry that they provide is outstanding because the skilled operator, supported by well-operated logistics in a highly contested GPS, GNSS denied environment, is trained to take the targets at the tactical, operational, and strategic levels. From this one sentence, I will take the broad to the ecosystem. It's not about a drone. It's not about the hardware. It's about what you add onto it, what advanced technology, advanced navigation, AI-based target recognition, and other systems that you can add on. It's that well-trained operator that has to undergo training every week. Every time I speak to the warfighters, they are undergoing training or retraining, and this is on the basis which is equipped with electronic warfare and trying to replicate in the real battlefield environment, if we can say. So the training is not on the simulator. The training is in the real world conditions, or close to. And the part of that is that tactics continuously changing. So it's not only the drone that will magically fly into the target, it's a continuous way how you operate and how you learn from your adversary. And that pace of innovation adaptation is about 2 to 3 weeks, 6 weeks at maximum. I think the key challenge for Australia, for other countries, for NATO countries, is to scramble how to keep up with this innovation. Is it worth just observe and see what other countries do, or how Ukraine, how Russia respond, or is it important to step up in this race as well and try to invest in your own sovereign capabilities and sovereign industry to develop these systems? So,
and if we were to do so, do you think we're at a point where we're at a productive capacity that enables us to take the best possible advantage for our own national interest with a level of engagement on the war front? Are we there, or is there a gap?
I believe there is a gap. And is there a need? Is there a requirement? Are there a specific requirement that are needed at this stage? So I think we are lacking, of course, in capacity in terms of numbers and scale. However, it is important to invest and support the industrial base with our Australian industry. That they are absolutely talented. There are so many companies, both in uncrewed systems and components and logistics and counter-UAS, who are actually at the forefront. They are leaders internationally, who are working internationally and who are also supporting Ukraine forefront, and they are quite successful. I think what we are missing is that prioritization, and really that importance of these systems. I don't think we are still at the mindset, although we do appreciate that robotic autonomous systems, they are at some stage will be developing, but again, at some stage is not clear enough, and that pace, whether it by 2040 or by 2030, is not fast enough. So there are many countries who are doing it with a rapid pace, and I think we need to keep up with that and just seize those opportunities where our industries are at the forefront, and we can be well leading at these efforts, but we're not there yet.
So how would you describe our pace? If rapid is what we're after, what pace are we operating at the moment?
It depends what the goal is, and I think that we are well bounded by the National Defence Strategy and the priorities, IIP and defence industry strategies and investment that we have as the priorities. So we don't prioritise uncrewed systems well enough, and we should.
Okay. So perhaps I could ask you to take on notice what it would look like, in your view, if we were prioritising, so we can kind of get the lay of the land, and what it might look like if we were to move to the level that you're advocating for. And this is my last question, then I want to go to the committee members, so if you can just indicate you've got questions, that'd be helpful. Ms Templeman and I heard on Friday afternoon from the Defence Force with regard to procurement, that there has been a massive shift with the shift in strategy to a much more forward-leaning posture, and that 80% of the procurement plans and contracts have now been shifted, which is big change for the industry, and that 20% are advancing, and that there is a very big transition underway. We also heard about bids that are being put pitch days by the industry to make Defence aware of what's possible, but we continue to hear from industry that they're not getting the information from the Defence Force in a timely way or in an easily accessible way for them to make a contribution and to plan the development of any product to match that. So if you could give any commentary around your observations with regard to procurement, primes, small and medium enterprises, disruption, and where are we right now?
I think we are moving in this direction, and from my observation to the knowledge that I have heard about the changes into the faster, accelerated procurement changes. But these changes were underway, which sometimes is not easily available, as you mentioned, to some of the defence industry, or maybe not publicly available. And there is still a challenge between that balance for the opportunity for the primes, which I highly respect, and they develop reliable systems. However, there should be better opportunities for small and medium enterprise, as well as the way how these systems could be procured. I think we still need some changes and more rapid changes in this pace, and there could be different approaches. I will just give an example, and these could be just taken as an example, but some points, let's say, back in Ukraine. So there is a Brave One defense cluster, and it's an innovative initiative between government, defense, and industry who are working on the basis of a rapid research and development, test and evaluation, and then bringing to the warfighters the technologies they need. And they create a specific market of those technologies where the warfighters can choose what they need. It's like Amazon-based, and they can prioritize. So those systems that are provided within a specific market, they are reliable, they're tested, and they can be well available at any pace. I think that the procurement at the government level in Ukraine still may take longer, maybe like a month or two, still considered to be long, but it's of course less than 5 to 10 years or 1 to 2 years, right? So definitely not there.
It's a very important statement that I'm sure that we'll mention in our report.
That's
okay.
Right.
Could I ask you to take on notice, if it was to work better, that whole system, what are the sticky points? What resolutions would you see if it was really working properly, or if there's jurisdictions where it is working properly? Could you give us an idea of what that would look like? Okay, I'm happy to take questions now. Who's
Can
that?
I do a follow-up to your procurement?
Yes, I'll go to you, Ms Templeman, then I'll go
I'll
to
just
Mr
ask one.
Gosling, who's indicated, and then to Mr Newman.
Thank you. Just following up, Dr Malloy, on the procurement side. So we were in the public hearing last Friday. The time frame was 4.5 months between, asking for people to be
Okay, for those
interested.
listening along at home, the bells in both the Senate and the House of Reps ringing. So we're going to suspend, and we will return as soon as those votes are over.
I'll finish that sentence.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Ms Malloy.
That's fine.
we were told was that it took 4.5 months from start to signing the contract. Is that, it's obviously not as fast as is happening in the Ukraine, but would you consider that to be speedy enough for, in terms of the Defence Force being able to get this work happening? Is that a reasonable time? We're used to hearing defence things taking a lot longer than that.
Anything less than 5 to 10 years, I think, reasonable. However, it depends, of course, on the systems. Of course, it depends what we are talking about and what is the purpose, what is it acquisition, and what is its sustainability of those systems, what is the life cycle of the systems, how often we'll need to change that, right? However, what you're describing seems like reasonable change.
So, and just to be really clear, it was then an 18-month contractual period for delivery. So 4.5 months to sign, which sounded really quick to us compared to some of the things we've heard previously, and then 18 months. So it sounds like it's calibrating it. So yes, all I was keen to do was get a sense, is that the sort of pace we could expect to see and should be pleased to see in the Australian acquisition
and
space?
It would be a great a shift, of course. So we do need to see changes in acquisition. We do need to see changes in the terms and a specific period of time that it takes from start to finish, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Newman.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dr. Malloy. I've got just a couple of questions, and the first one is to step back a bit. We've heard previously in this committee that the war in Ukraine is really like a late 19th century, early 20th century warfare with 21st century technology. And I'm interested in your appraisal of that, because you're focusing on not just the technological advances and how we can respond. You know, what are the lessons that we can learn? It seems a strange war. You know, it's like something out of Verdun and the Somme meets something that we might see on a movie. So I'm very interested in what you think about that.
Yeah. So, in fact, it is quite a challenging, of course, and very devastating war for Ukrainian people. But the key part, when we get back to the way how it's been fought with various different types of weapons, but most dominantly with uncrewed systems. Of course, if you think about 2022 and the need to defend against, let's say, 1,000 kilometers of line of contact, so you need to defend everywhere at each territory, and you need to have something to defend it with. So, and particularly, of course, drones appear to be that technology that at some places was the only technology or the only weapon that could stop Russians. So it started from the necessity and, of course, the reliability and the waiting time from the partners to receive some support takes time, but you need to fight every day, you need to defend lives. And these systems have become the life saviors. So they originated, of course, with a range of different types of drones, like large drones, like Bayraktar was a national hero because it could deliver specific results. But now drones are no longer just toys. Drones are really considered to be like, they are really those game changers that help in different situations. And it's not only about strikes. It's also about logistics. It's also about humanitarian support, search and rescue. It's about intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So most of the information, if not all, well, actually 86% of all targets on the battlefield are received by drones. That information, those eyes in the skies and their opportunity to see 100 kilometers away from the battlefield provide that transferability and visibility of the whole picture So from different perspectives, so on one side, for the commanders, for the leaders, it provides that information that makes them make decisions faster. And if you can make that decision faster, of course, you can outpace your enemy. Another part, it has become a force multiplier. Of course, considering that formidable force and lots of numbers of Russian fighters, it's very hard to sustain. Hence, having like one drone pilot and many drones that operate, that provide that opportunity to, of course, to defend against it. And the key part for Ukraine, the goal is to remove the warfighter from that front line. So now we can see the kill zone chain, like in terms of 40 kilometers. That continuously expanding, so there is nothing but drones in that part. And as I was saying, everyone is a sensor on the battlefield because everyone can be detected, and that becomes a threat. So those movies that we see as a Terminator is not the future, is actually present, and right. There are so many developments. If we
it's not
see,
science fiction, it's
real
real
now. It's not science fiction, it's a real. It's absolutely real. And more what we see is that not just integrated force, as we talk about, some people, but we see integrated drone arm race force as well, where the ground vehicles working with aerial vehicles, or aerial vehicles working in combination with subsurface vessels, and they are delivering impressive results. So not to mention, of course, targets like tanks and fighter jets and helicopters. But no asset is safe at any pace. So there are drones that can fly without any signature and that can make significant results. So I think as we think about the encrypted systems, in parallel, we need to think about the ways to defend against them in parallel and is in the same adaptability and innovation cycle. Because as drones become smarter, you need to think about new ways how to defend against them, and it's individual level, it's your assets, critical infrastructure, and of course civilians.
Am I right in saying that it's a bit like in the American Civil War, where the Monitor fought the Merrimack in an ironclad fight on battleships, and after that every wooden ship in every navy of the world was completely obsolete? I mean, now we're in a point where, am I right in that analogy? And now we've got a situation where, in the last couple of years, warfare has gone to the point where drones are absolutely vital in any warfare. Is that where we are at the moment?
Yes, so this is correct. So drones are here to stay. They will be present in any future conflict. We've seen that in recent conflicts in Middle East, as well as in other conflicts, and I can give you some facts. So in 2010, only 3 countries possessed armed drones. In 2024, we have 118 countries who possess armed drones. And these numbers are exponentially increasing. So this, why? Particularly because they represent the 2 important intersections in military affairs: the precise nature of weapons and the rise of robotics. When combined, they are flown remotely, at no risk to operator, and capable of delivering a lethal effect. And of course, because they are cheaper and they are more available, that really takes us to the point where every country is in that race of developing more advanced autonomous systems, at the same time thinking about how is it possible to bring the cost down. So we also need to remember about that cost imposition strategy, and they represent quite an important and influential type of weapon. They could be a delivery mechanism, if you want to call them, but there are different types, there are different functions, and they will be present. They will enhance traditional capabilities that defence has, and they will work along them. So that's not only the tools, they are already becoming partners where we are going to be working with these systems in current and any future battlefields.
And my final question is this. You've concentrated on the human factors, and I think you recommend that all our officers in the ADF are at the point where we can operate these things in the battlefield. Am I right in saying that this is going to be integral to our, not just our development procurement in that, but our training for our individual troops in the ADF? And would it extend not just to the Army but other aspects as well?
Yes.
The Navy and Air
jump
Force.
on the end of that with, if you could reflect also how that affects our integration with other forces as well. Thanks.
Exactly. Thanks.
Okay. So just to reiterate, you are more focusing on the need of human factors.
Yes, the factors. You concentrate on that as well.
Yeah. So
and
I
how
pay
we train people.
I pay a lot of attention to that because I still believe that human is at the center, and systems will not operate themselves. They still will need that. That present all the time, right? And it is important to highlight that from human factors perspective. So all aspects that could be supported to the warfighter across the three services, across integrated force, not only in Army, but it is substantially important to reduce their cognitive load, to improve their situational awareness, to be able to understand the battlefield and make faster decisions. And of course, it all leads to that improved performance and decision making. It is vital to focus not only on the technical, but those non-technical human factors aspects in training.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. If you could take on notice how that is happening in terms of best practice in the world that we might learn from.
And the integration, because you would think it's really only the Army, but I want to know whether other aspects, the Navy and the Air Force, require that as well.
Yeah, and the integration of undersea drones with
That's right.
aerial drones.
That's right.
As well, which would you would think would connect those forces anyway. We're going to Mr. Boyce and then Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. I'm interested in the economics of modern warfare in respect to numbers of required units to be an effective deterrent. And that relates also to our ability to rearm ourselves in respect to a private business, setting up a business that would produce these things. What exactly is the number of an effective deterrent needed in respect to drones? So in relation to the Ukraine war, how many do they use a day? How many do we need? Do we need 100? Do we need 10,000? Do we need 1 million? What is the number? And obviously multiply that by $500, it all turns into economics.
Yeah, this is a very good question, and I always highlight the importance of cost imposition strategy on the adversary. So the key part, of course, from Ukrainian perspective, is to be able to strike a $3 million or $20 million tank with a $500 drone, right? So, and if you can just find those various aspects to do that, cheap and sustainable, so then it brings that economics of the warfare that has been shaped by the low-cost, high-volume systems. This is not to say that high-end systems have no place. All systems are important, and it's important to have that balance between both. The key part, when you say how many do we need, of course, it depends on in the context, so of operation and a specific, of course, lots of variables. But if to tell you an example from Ukraine, if the starting numbers were just, let's say, 7,000 a year, they could be produced by several companies. To 2024, we've seen these numbers have increased to millions. So Ukraine was able to manufacture up to 2.2 million drones. And these days, in 2025, we have 200,000 drones used per month. These numbers are continuously increasing. And if we look from Russian side, there has been a recent exponential increase in the numbers of Shahed drones that they're using daily. At some stage, there were 700 drones a night. So you need the systems to be able to defend against that, again, in a cost-effective way. And the numbers are continuously increasing. I think this is one of the challenges. It's not static, it's a dynamic, and the situation is continuously changing. Of course, it can be looked at different territory and in different aspects, but I think the key challenge is to be able to produce those systems or have the opportunity, if needed, to produce at scale and at speed.
So what you're telling me is Australia needs the capability to produce millions of these things?
If needed.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Mr. Gosling. No, you're right. There was a question that I think Mr. Smith wanted to ask, so I'm going to have a crack at it for him. How did you find working with the Australian Army Research Centre?
Fantastic. I really found that excellent collaboration and cooperation that we had. So I was very pleased that in 2022, in a number of their research questions and grants, they did have the question dedicated to lessons learned from Ukraine. And at that point of time, I truly believe that Australia has to learn from Ukraine and with Ukraine. And of course, both public, defense, government, industry, they need to have the insights from the real battlefield, and they need to be well informed. So I'm very grateful that they had this opportunity. And actually, I'm working on the next stage of my report that is planned to be published early next year. This is important to continuously learn, not only observe, but have various aspects and different sources of reliable information that could be informing Department of Defence, government, industry, and public.
I know one of your recommendations is a call for the establishment of a Centre of Excellence for the UAS capabilities to do this continuous innovation. Perhaps a Centre for Excellence and some connectivity to industry. Could you provide a little more detail about what such a thing might look like on notice?
Okay.
Mr. Smith also indicated that, with the capacity amplification that's happening everywhere, we'll send you the details of these questions as well. So with the capacity amplification that's occurring on both sides of the battlefield, we've spoken a lot about Ukraine because, we are of the view that it is a very illegal and immoral invasion and a massive infringement on the rule of law and sovereignty. But the Russians are learning and innovating as well. Does it get to a point where the drones are so dense that it's just mutually assured destruction? Does it have an end cycle where this is no longer an innovative technology, it's just one that is going to be a battle of how much money can be thrown at the replacement of drones?
Maybe when the war ends on the Ukrainian terms, but at present there is a continuous innovation, there is no stop, there is no pause. The key part is, of course, for everyone to understand, is that there is a continuous work, 24/7, research and development, test and evaluation, practice, continuous cycle and improvement of different types. So the key part is to have systems that work. It is very important to understand and be able to appreciate that there may be a variety of different systems. Let's say 200 types of FPV drones. but in fact maybe 5 or 10 companies may produce those reliable ones. So there can be a lot of opportunities as well as with international partners, but only those manufacturers and all those companies, those innovations that are present in the real environment and working in the continuous changing and iterations, they are staying current and they're staying important. Having said that, there is different learning across the whole 1,000+ kilometers of the front line, and different services prefer, based on the geographical landscape or specific location, a specific type of drone. If they need to operate in the river, there will be a river drone plus aerial drones, and if there is some other situation, there will be some different types of drones. But drones is an essential now. It's not a peripheral. It is absolutely central to all operations, and there is specific drone units and counter-UAS units that are embedded in every structure of the unit that fight.
In addition to recommending that every person, both in the force and in the reserves, the standing force plus the reserves, needs to train in UAS management and strategy and for surveillance, recon, logistics, humanitarian aid, you suggest that there needs to be a definitional dimension to the roles, responsibilities and ways that the Australian government can protect against UASs. Is there any work being done on that at the moment?
I believe there is some work in progress. To my knowledge, there are some training centres that are being established, but very basic level. So just to understand, what the system is, and this is not sufficient. So we do need to do more. We need to first appreciate that drones are a threat, and so both being able to know how to integrate it in the current training, any future training for all operators, as well as the way how to defend against them, is absolutely essential. So we need to do more in this space. And importantly, I do highlight that we need to work with Ukraine and those experts who know what actually is happening and what would be those best practices, how to train, what the training requirements, if needed, how quickly it needs to be developed, let's say training modules or a specific system, and how to training instructors as well in this space. Of course, there are different types of drones that are currently present, and there are some specific recommendations to do that. But we need to keep up, and I do believe that we are quite behind in this space.
Okay, so best experience is in Ukraine. Are there any other jurisdictions that are not currently in a hot war situation where you believe the practices and behind the training processes and structures are established? Where's best practice?
I would say it's a cooperation. So there is a good cooperation between UK and Ukraine. It's, of course, originated even from the Drone Capability Coalition, where UK is leading. Australia is part of that. And there is an opportunity for the platform for knowledge sharing, for, of course, research sharing, and for that joint work and lessons learned from that. There is also practice between NATO and Ukraine. There is a specific educational center where there is a continuous process on the lessons learned and reflecting to, let's say, NATO countries. There is also the US and Ukraine cooperation, where they closely work together, again, learning lessons and applying that to their soldiers. And actually, they have implemented already training to some of their units, and they're continuously practicing that and improving, similar to the UK forces. I think that will be a great opportunity for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us for the work that you're doing, the insights that you bring to the committee in our consideration of the 23-24 Annual Defence Report. You will be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and you'll be able to request any corrections to transcription errors should they be there in the transcript. And if you could respond to any additional information requests, questions on notice, by Tuesday the 18th of November, that would assist the committee in preparing our report. The Secretariat will be in touch with you with any of those questions. And if there's anything after our discussions this afternoon that you think is important that you add to your evidence, we would be very happy to receive that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
We are going to switch to a digital conversation now, taking evidence from retired Major General Mick Ryan, who's joining us. Thank you very much for your patience in waiting for the committee to come to you, Major General.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the Defence Subcommittee?
My name is Mick Ryan. I'm a retired Australian Army Major General. I am a fellow at the Lowy Institute as well as the Centre for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. I'm also a strategic advisor to several defence companies in the United States, Australia and the United Kingdom, including Skydio, Jane's Defence and Beaton Zone in Brisbane.
Thank you very much. Can I just advise you, although I'm sure you're experienced in this regard, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of the Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I now invite you to make an opening statement before we proceed to discussion.
Well, thank you to the committee for the invitation to speak with you today. I'll keep my opening statement short. I would like to talk about two things. Firstly, some trends in drone warfare, and secondly, what the committee might seek to recommend in its report. I just returned from my most recent Ukraine visit. I try and do that a couple of times a year, as well as visit the Middle East and other places where we're seeing drone developments. Drone operations in Ukraine are now a saturated environment. It's extraordinarily difficult now within kilometres of the front line to do things without being visible. It is also a critical part of the larger adaptation battle that we're seeing take place between Russia and Ukraine, and it's also now drone operations are extending into a wider global adaptation war where Russia, China, Iran and North Korea are sharing not just battlefield tactics, but the technologies as well as the industrial methods to rapidly scale up the production of drones. I think there are several key trends that the committee should be aware of. Firstly, drones do not replace, but they extend human and conventional military capacity. Good evidence of this is Ukraine's fighting brigades, which use both artillery and drones together and generally have one drone battalion, but 4 to 6 infantry battalions. Secondly, drones are co-evolutionary with electronic warfare. These two things go together. You cannot do one without the other in the modern battlefield. Third, drones have application and are being used in the air, at land and at sea in Ukraine and in Russia. But we are also seeing next generation robotic warfare where drones carry other drones and drones attack other drones. Fourth, drones and counter-drone operations are reaching parity. The level of investment in counter-drone operations that we're seeing now, which will impose costs on drone users, mean that drone operations may not be as decisive in future as they were in 2022 to 2024. They're still essential, but I think we are seeing a change in the nature of counter-drone operations. Fifth, training is vital to drone effectiveness. The most effective drone units, the ones who get more of their drones to their targets, are the ones that have good training regimes. The final trend I think that is worthy of notice is that the proliferation of AI in robotics means that our entire training and leadership culture in the ADF must evolve from one where we use machines to one where we are partnering with them. So what do we need to do? Well, firstly, we need to ensure we translate the right lessons from Ukraine for the Pacific theatre and then integrate these right lessons into all of our warfighting as well as humanitarian assistance concepts. We must balance small numbers of exquisite and expensive drones like Ghost Shark with larger numbers of cheap attritable drones, and as such, this committee might recommend change procurement rules for cheaper bulk drone purchases that can be done quickly. We need a different balance of imported and Indigenous drones. This committee might recommend policy that ensures a figure of, say, 50% of all military and public safety drones in this country are made in this country. We need a balance of long-range and short-range drones. Both are important. Not every problem in the Pacific theatre needs drones with very long ranges. This committee might recommend this be included in the coming National Defence Strategy. And finally, we need a balance of crewed and uncrewed systems in the ADF. This committee might recommend that the ADF needs many more drone companies and battalions. The Australian Army is many drone battalions short of where it should be. The Air Force is multiple drone squadrons short. The Navy should have hundreds of surface drones and subsurface drones to prevent or at least challenge future Chinese naval circle work around our country, as what we saw this year. I think I'll conclude my opening statement there by saying that drones are now an integral part of all military affairs, be they warfighting, peacekeeping or humanitarian and disaster assistance. They are not a silver bullet, but we are going to see them everywhere in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very incisive opening statement. Can I just go to your comment about the proliferation of AI in drones? One of the key elements in countries where the rule of law and international law abides is to make sure that there is a human oversight dimension with regard to that in terms of moral action to undertake moral war. How well is that being articulated and followed and understood on the battlefield from your experience?
I think the Ukrainians pay a lot of attention to this. The Ukrainian president has been very open about Ukraine will fight by the rules. There's both strategic imperatives for that, but also protecting the souls of soldiers. Killing is an awful responsibility we give our soldiers, and we want to make sure they only kill when they have to. AI can actually help with that to ensure that they minimise collateral damage. I think the Ukrainians are using AI well. The Russians are not. They don't have, nor do they stick by any of the laws of armed conflict that Ukraine or Australia or other Western countries would stick by. So there's good case studies from Ukraine and awful case studies from Russia in this regard.
Okay. If I can pick up on your commentary about the increasing integration between North Korea, Iran, China and Russia. Integration of defence forces, the integration of capacity is something of interest to this committee. You're essentially telling us that there is a lawless, unethical, highly financed collaboration between four nations that we're seeing operationalised on the front in Ukraine. Is that a fair summary of where we are?
What we're seeing, I would describe it as a learning and adaptation block where these four nations share their insights, their lessons and analysis from the battlefield, from sanctions evasion, from strategic coercion and misinformation, and they're doing it in near real time in a way that probably was not available until just a few short years ago. They're not integrating their militaries, but they're integrating how they are learning, and they formed a kind of knowledge market for modern war and strategic confrontation with the West.
That's a very, very helpful insight for me. Thank you. Can I just go to your comment about the learnings from the Ukraine and Russia context that we need to take and think about in terms of the national defence strategy in Australia and our particular role and the challenges we face in a very different geographical environment, but perhaps with the same challenges to us and lower levels of integration than in that group, in that knowledge sharing group that you've been talking about, Russia, China, North Korea and Iran. Where are we? In our part of
we're on a journey. We probably haven't gone on that journey as fast as we need to. There's been very few official products about the key lessons from the war that have been put out by the Department of Defence. I recently published a report that looked at how do we translate Ukraine lessons for the Pacific, looking at the different geographic terrain, weather, political and technological environment that's quite different in the Pacific. And we can't just take Ukraine lessons and flop them down over Taiwan or flop them down over Australia. There's a whole range of contextual differences that we need to take care we're translating. The other point I would make about translating lessons from Ukraine is the majority of the lessons are not new ones. I think when it comes to drones and AI and potentially the speed of adaptation, these are new lessons. But the vast majority of lessons about leadership, about strategy, about civil-military interaction, about mobilising society and industry are old lessons that we in the West have had to relearn over the last few years.
So, Major General Ryan, is the article you're referring to there, the military training lessons from Ukraine, published on the 29th of October 2025?
No, this is a report from the Australian Army Research Centre that came out in August. I'm happy to provide a link to that document. It's a public document. It's not classified or anything, and it would be available for your committee members to peruse. I have to
confess, I haven't read that. I've read a couple of articles from you that might be elements from there, so I'll have a look at that and we can attach it to our report for people who are interested. One final question from me before I go to colleagues. Operation Kudu, Australia is making a significant contribution there. We're talking about drones as a critical part. Clearly, we're not at the forefront of that. Australia's contribution to Kudu, though, is a part of the integration with other forces. How is that going, and is that a vehicle for further learning about integration with new technologies?
I think Australia's commitment to Operation Kudu is enormously important for several reasons. Firstly, we're helping train junior Ukrainian leaders who aren't getting that training at home because of time constraints and these kind of things. It's also exposing our soldiers to combat veterans of the most modern war possible. But it's not just our trainers that are part of Operation Kudu. We have Australians embedded in US and NATO forces in Germany that are helping coordinate a range of different support mechanisms for Ukraine. So Operation Kudu and activities like it are vital. Where Australia needs to step up more, however, is the drone coalition that Australia signed up to under the leadership, I believe it's Latvia. We've done very little to contribute to that. And I think we need to step up our commitment, whether it's monetary or other ways, to that drone coalition and to help Ukraine and to help the ADF learn about modern drone warfare.
There's a new Latvian ambassador to Australia who's already raised this drone coalition with me since her arrival. I'm the chair of that friendship group, so probably it was a very important conversation, and I've got some documentation that I'll provide to the committee that she gave to me. I'm going to go to the Deputy Chair, Mr Boyce, and if others could indicate that they have questions. Mr
Thank you,
Newman.
Major General. I will just basically ask you the same question as what I did to Dr Malloy in respect to what is a number that is an acceptable deterrent in respect to economics. So I'm trying to get my head around what this would cost on an economic idea, if you like. Dr Malloy basically indicated that we need the capability to produce, a couple of million of these things if need be. At $500 a drone, just for hypothetical, that's an enormous amount of money. Do you agree? Is that are you on the same page?
I think it's a little bit more difficult than saying how many $500 drones. Ghost Shark drones do not cost $500. Clearly, we need some long-range drones that are going to be very expensive. We're going to need hundreds, maybe thousands of those. But we're going to need the medium and shorter range drones, and of those, probably we're going to need tens of thousands or the capacity to build hundreds of thousands if we go to war. It's really about productive capacity and how many we need to produce, because the short and medium range drones, the vast majority never reach their targets. So when it comes to long range, we need thousands or tens of thousands. In short range drones, we probably need hundreds of thousands. At the moment, the Russians are using, according to the brief the Ukrainians gave me just last week, about 150,000 first-person view drones per month in Ukraine. That doesn't include the Shahed drones. They are producing 35,000 of those Shahed drones a year.
Thank you.
Thank you so
So
much.
it gives you a sense there's a balance between longer and shorter range drone production.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr Batt's about to leave us, so I'm going to give him a chance to ask one question.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Major General. Hopefully a short one to follow on from what Colin just asked. You mentioned there about having 50% of these drones being able to be built within the country. Again, at the moment, or how quickly would that take to get that sort of capability that we have in this country that you're aware of?
It would take some time to build to that, but it's not going to happen without government policies to support the procurement of Australian-made drones, not just by the Australian Defence Force, but police forces, bushfire brigades, emergency service organisations around Australia. To mandate that would give a very big shot in the arm to both drone producers in this country who have exported thousands of drones to Ukraine for the war, but also to counter-drone companies in this country. We have some leading-edge capabilities in both, but it needs government policy and support to kick it along the way.
Thank you.
What does counter-drone look like?
Well, ma'am, there's a bunch of different technologies to counter drones. When it comes to small, short-range drones, this can be electronic warfare, jamming, spoofing, can be shooting them down with a shotgun in some circumstances, or AI-targeted machine guns. For higher-flying, faster drones, it looks like small drone interceptors the Ukrainians have developed at about $5,000 a pop to bring down $50,000 Shahed drones. So there's a range of different types of counter-drone, and we're starting to see both microwave technology and laser technology mature. Indeed, there are Australian companies that are doing this very thing right now that are at the leading edge of counter-drone technology.
Could I ask on notice for you to give the committee some insight into how the risk weighting in the sector is managed in the US by the government, and what risk is attributed to the producers? Because there seems to be a lot of ambiguity about who's bearing what risk at the moment, and I think that's part of the impediment that we're seeing for the further development. So if you could provide any insight into that on notice, that would be helpful. I'm going to go now to Mr Newman.
Thank you very much, Mr Ryan. I want to ask a question. One of the themes of our inquiry is Australia's international defence cooperation. And one country that has really ramped up its defence is Poland. And I'm interested in if you've got any insight about how they've done that and what sort of defence cooperation we can undertake in respect of their learnings.
Thank you for the question. I've visited Poland over a dozen times in the last 4 years. I've spent time with their Chief of Defence, Vice Chief, and other officials, including I did a TV program when I was there a couple of weeks ago. So I'm very knowledgeable about their journey, about their step up in defence preparedness and in conscription. The most important thing the Poles have done is about having honest conversations with Polish civilians and not sugarcoating the threat that Russia poses. Unfortunately, too many Western countries haven't been keen to have those honest conversations with their citizens because it's expensive. The Poles have not shied away from it. It helps that they are proximate to the Russians, that they are very close, and that they have history with the Russians. As one of my Polish friends said, appeasing Russia ends up with Polish people in rail cars. So the historical context and the proximity of threat is different, but their strategic journey is worthy of study, and their force structure decisions they've made, I think, are worthy of study by the Department of Defence and the Australian Government.
Thanks very much. I would commend to you a book by Professor Norman Davies on the vanishing kingdoms of Europe, where he talks about the long history of Poland and Russia, and very fascinating. It backs in exactly what you said. I'm very keen. I commend that book to you. I'm reading it at the moment. But I'm also interested in how they have transitioned their defence. I mean, they have built up massively their defence forces. How have they responded?
Well, the first thing that kind of differentiates them from us is that they're a continental military. They're mainly land-based. They've bought several thousand new main battle tanks from Korea and the United States. The Australian Defence Force, I think, is getting 60 HIMARS. The Poles have ordered 900 plus hundreds more of the South Korean variant. So they've gone big and they've built such a large military that they hope that it's not worth the Russians taking them on. They've obviously worked very hard to keep the Americans close, which is exactly what we should be doing. They've also worked very hard to integrate themselves into the councils of Europe and into NATO to ensure that, you know, Poland's security is seen as European security and vice versa. So I think the Poles have been very clever strategically. They're at one of those hinge points in Europe where a lot of people have come through on their way into Central Europe. They don't intend to be run over again like they were in the Second World War, and we should help them to ensure they don't.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Could you take on notice an update or some way of educating me and perhaps others, but certainly me, about the force structure change in Poland in a way that is useful for us with a very different marine context? Thanks. I think Mr Zappi is next, and then Ms Clutterham, and then I'll come to you, Mr Gosling.
Thank you, Chair. Major General, given the rapid innovation of drones and counter technology to drones, what would you suggest is the average life cycle of a new drone? In other words, before it becomes obsolete. And when they do become obsolete, what happens to them? What are they used for?
The average life cycle of the hardware is until it gets shot down. But generally days or weeks, are only around 50% of drones actually reach their target, sometimes much less. The life cycle of software in the drones is much, much shorter, sometimes 24 hours. So there's a hardware life cycle and a software life cycle that are spinning at a speed that I think is very hard to comprehend, if not incomprehensible, to many defence bureaucrats here in Australia.
Thank you.
I'll go now to Ms Clutterham.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Mr Ryan. I just had one question that I wanted to pick up on, a question that the Chair asked at the very beginning of the session, and that was about AI and drones and what that means for rules of engagement and the law of war. Do you think that, given the proliferation of AI and uncrewed drones, and in the context of your comments about some countries not, bothering to follow them, do you think that do we need to rewrite them? Are they fit for purpose? And do you see that there is a risk to the race to the bottom in terms of how we engage in conflict because of the proliferation of AI and uncrewed drones? Thank you.
I think it's a great question, because if there's a lot of academic articles on this where you would get the impression we're starting from zero on this issue. We're not. Military institutions have 5,000 years of history of how to establish trust in military institutions, how to oversee subordinates, how to establish and confirm accountability and these kind of things. So we already have a very good knowledge base how to do that with humans. It's really about how do we translate that for an era of AI. So we're already a long way down that path when it comes to transparency, accountability, making sure people act in accordance with the laws of armed conflict and the laws of Australia. It's just making sure we can have the same oversight mechanisms for machines and AI at the same time. So we already have many of the baseline theories and processes there. We just need to translate them for AI.
Mm-hmm. And how easily can that be done, do you think?
Well, it depends how much you want to spend on different AI, but, you know, do you want to develop AI in this country, or do we want to be an AI taker? Even the US military is an AI taker now. It's just using large corporations to provide AI. I've seen how they use it. It is changing the speed and the quality of what they do in many organisations. Australia is quite a way behind that at this point in time.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Mr Gosling.
G'day, Mick. I don't know if you can see me.
I sure can. I can see the back of your head.
Yeah, there you go.
It's the best view.
So, yeah, we're talking about the different operating environment. For us, the littoral environment. Who's got the best setup at the moment for when we're, you know, operating in an archipelago with the medium and heavy landing craft? Because it's obviously a different scenario, and they might need to operate over longer distances, but in a pretty difficult environment, and even, you know, come back and land, you know, back on the vessel or whatever. Not disposable. So is the answer something pretty robust that's been marinised, that can operate out ahead of amphibious troops but be captured back on the landing craft somehow?
I think the marinisation is probably going to be the lesser of the problems. The bigger problem we're going to have is just the weather and the terrain of our region. The average heat in our region is much more than Ukraine's, as is the average humidity, both of which have a very big impact on battery life, on communications, and just corrosion of drones. Also, Ukraine doesn't have this thing called cyclones, which our region has a lot of, and there will be many parts of our region where our army already operates where it rains nearly every day of the year. Drones don't operate in rain. So there's a whole range of climatic differences between Ukraine and our region that we have to put a lot of effort into making sure that we understand, because many of the drones that work in Ukraine just are not going to work in our region. So marinisation is important, but so will be understanding climate, so will be understanding terrain. For example, how do you fly drones under triple canopy in a jungle? Our soldiers will be working in jungle throughout the region. So there's a bunch of these things, and this is why I produced this report in August, because I have not seen the kind of attention to these issues that we need to be paying attention to.
Thanks.
I'll go now to Mr Rebello.
Thank you very much, Chair. I had two sort of brief questions, but to start, I'm very interested in how Defence can better collaborate more effectively with Australia's private drone sector, particularly within the context of if there was an immediate threat that needed to be addressed. Are there any existing mechanisms of collaboration, and are there any opportunities?
Well, there's lots of mechanisms of collaboration, just none of them are moving very fast. The ASCA was set up for this. You're seeing a lot of programs go through there. But when you visit military units like I do, the kit isn't coming through. The drones are not coming through. The interaction with industry is too slow, but the regulatory framework is zero risk, and it's very difficult for military units to get the number and the quality of drones that they really need. I would propose to the committee that a very good model is the Brave One organisation in Ukraine. It sits outside their Department of Defence in their Ministry of Digital Transformation. But it is the Babel fish between the Ukrainian General Staff requirements and Ukrainian industry. It tests different options and then goes back to the Ukrainian High Command and says, these will fit your requirement, and then they buy them. But the interesting thing the Ukrainians do is then put approved drones on a available list that units can then buy additional drones from. Now, crowdfunding, I'm not sure, is something we really want our units to be doing in Australia. There's all kinds of problems that could come from that. But it is interesting how the Ukrainians have this dual track of official procurement and unofficial procurement.
A little more information from that on notice, Major General, would be of considerable interest, I think, to the committee. I'll go now to Ms Templeman.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. We've talked a lot about the technology, the hardware, the software. I'm just thinking, picking up on some of the questions that have been asked and thinking about the operators. What's it like to operate a drone in a military environment? What are the challenges and the psychological impacts, and how are they different perhaps from other people working in that environment?
Well, first and foremost, drone operators are soldiers first, so they share the same hardships of every soldier that's deployed. But you are seeing in Ukraine now, the Russian main effort is to target Ukraine's drone operations centres. The new Russian Rubicon unit, which has proliferated along the front line, is targeting these drone operation centres because they know the Ukrainians use drones to make up for their manpower shortfalls. I obviously visit, I've just come back from visiting a couple of frontline units in Ukraine. I go into their command centres. They are like nothing that exists in the Australian Defence Force. They are highly digitised. Drone planners in a brigade or a battalion headquarters have normalised monitoring dozens of drone feeds at once. What we used to think as information overload, they've just normalised the monitoring of these things. So you have people that are sharing the same hardships as soldiers. It's pretty austere, that are being targeted by the Russians, are dealing with high information overload. And on top of that, they're bearing this massive pressure, not just from their military, but for Ukrainian society to fill in the gaps where there are manpower shortages.
And so what does that do to people? I guess I'm really interested in the human effect.
Well, it's pretty tough. I mean, there is a significant AWOL rate in bits of the Ukrainian armed forces. We can't overlook that. But like all soldiers on the front line, they are living underground for weeks, if not months at a time. There is a significant psychological impact in that, because any moment could see 1 or 10 or 50 Russian drones come in and kill you and your friends. So, you know, I don't think drone operators are experiencing any different circumstances to other Ukrainian soldiers on the front line, but there is a significant physical and psychological pressure on them. And let's not forget, the average age of a Ukrainian soldier at the moment is just a few years younger than me. They're all in their late 40s. And having just visited a couple of their assault regiments, seeing these fellows, there was one young fellow and just about everyone else was an old fellow like me.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Mr McCormick, you have the call.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Major General, for your service. Thank you for all the books that you have authored, because they present the volumes of your experience and your wisdom in the military. And the military is, as you've quite correctly pointed out, has really changed, particularly in recent years. Who would have thought 5 10 years ago that drones and that sort of technology would be playing such an important role and a lethal role. My hometown is Wagga Wagga. I know you know the Kapooka Barracks, the Blamey Barracks very, very well from your 35 years in the Khaki. Last week, and I don't want to be political here, and I'm not being, but last week the ambassador for Ukraine made some rather pointed comments about what Australia is and isn't doing in their opposition to the war of aggression by Russia. What do you, and you may well have covered this, and I apologise because I came in late. I followed.
No, we haven't.
Okay. What do you believe we as a nation could do that we are not doing now to help Ukraine win this now drawn-out conflict?
Thank you for the question. I think it's important to state up front, Australia has made a contribution to the defence of Ukraine, as Ambassador Vassell did note as part of his comments. I think it's been an important role, not just in the provision of military equipment and training, but also, diplomatic assistance and these kind of things as well. That said, what more might we do? I think we might help fund the procurement of weapons from Ukrainian defence industry, and for that probably get some of the IP or at least collaboration with the Ukrainian industry where we might set up a drone industry in Australia. Second, we might contribute more to the Ukrainian Reconstruction Fund that's been established in the World Bank so that Ukraine can rebuild schools and other critical infrastructure, not at the end of the war, but now. Kids need to go to school now. We should continue training. We may consider doing training elsewhere besides England in the future, perhaps closer to Ukraine. And we should continue ensuring we have people with NATO and the US Army in Europe to get the best insights from this war from those institutions.
Thank you. And if I could just ask a supplementary, you mentioned about the average age of the Ukrainian soldier. Is there any refreshing of those soldiers? Is there any plans or even capability to get younger soldiers on the front?
Well, younger soldiers can volunteer, but people between 18 and 25 cannot be conscripted in Ukraine. They can only conscript people down to 25. But largely, a lot of the people are coming in are in their 40s at the moment. It's very humbling to see that when you go see these fellows. I know I was commanding a brigade when I was 45, and it was hard work physically, I can tell you. As a young soldier in the infantry at that age, it's very, very difficult indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The committee has established a set of terms of reference for our interrogation of the now ageing Defence annual report. One of the terms of reference that we're interrogating is international defence cooperation and competition, and we've talked a little about that. But some of the submitters that we've had materials from have criticised the lack of reference to whom Australia is competing with in defence documents, including in the Defence Annual Report 23-24. And submitters felt that Australians should speak more honestly in regard to its competitors for the benefit of enhancing public understanding of the work of defence and for the social licence behind increased defence spending. And in part, Major General, I hope that the work of this Defence Committee, getting not only experts like yourself, former members of the Defence Force, and experts like Dr Malloy, who's given a testimony, but getting more evidence on the public record in a public way from the Defence Force itself, which we achieved actually last Friday in our first significant hearing. So I'm very keen to get your sense of how important that might be going forward. Are there any risks and what are the benefits?
Well, I think, as I spoke about with the polls, they've had a very honest conversation and dialogue between politicians and citizens about the threat posed by Russia. We haven't quite had that honest dialogue between politicians and citizens in this country because, the National Defence Strategy talks about deterrence by denial. It doesn't say who we're trying to deter. I mean, what are Australians paying their tax dollars for to the Australian Defence Force and Department of Defence, who are they protecting us against? Who are we trying to deter against dropping the region into some catastrophic conflict? So I think we need to be realistic about potentially saying that countries like China, Russia and North Korea are a threat to Australia's prosperity and security. Now, how we do that and the degree to which they pose a threat will require some nuance, but I think we need to be honest with the Australian people because they're not mugs, they're pretty smart and they're capable of these kind of conversations.
You mentioned the National Defence Strategy. It represents a significant shift from the balanced force posture that was there before. We got some pretty good evidence on Friday with regard to that. But in terms of the National Defence Strategy and Integrated Investment Program that were released in 2024, do you think that the change between 24 and now in the geopolitical environment, particularly in relation to the US, warrants a reassessment of that integrated focused force capability investment priorities? Like, how relevant does it remain? Is that the document that's fit for purpose? Is the document okay and the practice not meeting it? Like, what's going on in that space and what needs to happen to improve outcomes to reach the levels that you've been articulating are necessary?
Well, I think the focus force was always an interesting idea because it means you have a good sense of exactly what you're going to do in the next war. The secret is no democracy has ever been able to predict the next war. So the NDS is somewhat arrogant in thinking we can predict it without naming who the potential adversary is and then building a focus force around it. So I propose the next National Defence Strategy really needs a more balanced force, because a balanced force offers lots of different options to the Government of Australia when we get surprised, because we will get surprised. So I think that needs to evolve. We do need to reassess our assumptions about our partnership with countries like the United States. That's not to say we shouldn't be huge supporters of the alliance. We should be. There is no replacing the United States in our security architecture. But we need to have a look at the assumptions about when they will be there and when they might not be there for us. So I think they're important. And the third thing we need to look at is how has the threat changed in the last 2 years in our region? When the drafters of the 2024 National Defence Strategy sent it to government, I don't think they were anticipating a Chinese naval task group doing circle work around Australia. That might be normalised in future, and the strategy should be looking at how we might deter or respond to those kind of events, as well as other strategic surprises.
Could I ask you then to reflect on the AUKUS Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 situation and progress towards, suitable outcomes for the defence of the nation?
Well, I think Pillar 2 is a great collaboration between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States of America, even though a lot of this stuff was probably able to be done without the AUKUS agreement. I think the problem with Pillar 2 is we should perhaps bring in Canada. I think they have an amazing research and development base greater than Australia's, and so does Japan. So I think Pillar 2 could probably do with a couple more advanced, wealthy nations that share our values and share our aspirations for a peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. I think AUKUS Pillar 1, I've been very public. I'm not against nuclear-powered submarines. I do question whether the return on investment is going to be greater than the opportunity cost. And I think at the moment it's unclear. And what were the other options to achieve what the nuclear submarines are designed to achieve, which might have been cheaper or done differently to how nuclear submarines might achieve their mission?
I guess that's sort of a reflective, retrospective question. We're on that path and we're heading forward.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, which is important. And I think that's important for the security of investment by Australian companies into their part of the AUKUS design as we go forward. We can't relitigate. We've made some pretty serious decisions, and in my view, our relationships with our geostrategic partners need to be clearly honoured and articulated in a way that enables us to collectively work in the interests of democracy. If I can ask one final question with regard to military doctrine. Part of the purpose of the committee, for the purposes of the committee, could you explain what that is and its connection with training, and how has the Ukraine adapted its doctrine to speed up the training in face of real-world testing? What do we need to learn about that for our own force and its posture?
Well, someone who was responsible for Army training and doctrine at one point in my career, I better not mess this up. But military doctrine is about recording, analysing and sharing best practices in a military institution, whether those best practices come to flying a plane, driving a truck, firing a rifle, shooting artillery, or building teams within the Army or within the Australian Defence Force. So they are basically how we encode best practice, how we ensure we don't lose knowledge that's been built over dozens, if not hundreds of years of military practice. So that's what doctrine is. Its link to training is crucial because training is based on doctrine. That is the reference book for all training that takes place in the Australian system. When we train our soldiers at Wagga, at the home of the soldier, Kapuka, it is based on our doctrine. And when we train our junior leaders, tank drivers, ship drivers, it is based on our doctrine. So that's why doctrine is important, how it's linked to training. How is it happening in Ukraine? Well, this is a question I ask every time I go. How are you learning? What are your processes? And I get better answers to that every time I go back over the last 3.5 years. They are changing their doctrine, whether it is combined arms operations on the ground, whether it is higher level war fighting. They are evolving their doctrine and they are using it in their training system. Now, I would note their training system is under a lot of pressure because there is a constant need for reinforcements for the front line. But they are, balancing a whole lot of different things to evolve their doctrine, evolve how they learn and adapt, and ensure there is that linkage between doctrine and evolved training. One final put on training in Ukraine. They do institutional training at training centres, which are attacked very regularly by the Russians, but they also have battle schools in their brigades where they do frontline training and rehearsals as well. So there's a balance of implementing their doctrine between institutional training and battle schools at the front line.
This is a force that's fighting on its own without any other international partners on the ground. Integration of forces is something that we're focused on in our own context, not particularly in Ukraine. How much of a challenge is it to actually integrate forces effectively?
It's really, really hard, but fortunately the Australian Defence Force has many, many decades of experience in this, all the way back to World War I. World War II, we did a lot of integration with the Americans at sea, in the air, on the land, and we've continued doing that. In the most recent decade, not only are we doing that with the Americans on the land, air and sea, but we're doing it with space operations, cyber operations, cognitive warfare. But now if you go to a major exercise in this country, you will see not just American soldiers, sailors, airmen and women and Marines, you will see Japanese equivalents everywhere. And it's a wonderful thing to see. You will see New Zealanders, you will see Papua New Guineans. And the way you integrate is practice in peace so you're better at it in war. And I think the Australian Defence Force has become very, very good at partnering not just with our regional friends and allies, but those further away, be it Canada, the United States, the UK, and even the Germans and Italians and French, who often send their forces out here.
I think we saw photographs the other day of the big project that happened up in the north, the Integrated Force. It'll come back to me the name, but I think 18 different countries were involved. Talisman Sabre, thank you very much, yeah. So 18 countries is some considerable degree of integration, which is, I think, perhaps probably even more important for us in our geographical location than for the Ukrainians. Can I thank you very much, Major General Ryan, for your contribution to our thoughts today and informing our report. You mentioned a couple of things that you would recommend. Can I ask you on notice to give consideration to a series of recommendations that might flesh out a little more some of the conversations that we've had with you? If you have been asked, and indeed you have been asked to provide additional information, if that's possible, to get it to the Secretariat by Tuesday the 18th of November, that would be quite helpful. Of course, the Secretariat will be in touch with you with regard to that. You will also be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and you'll have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcription errors. Thank you for being with us this afternoon, Dr Malloy, Major General Michael Ryan. Thank you to all my colleagues for your attendance, to the Secretariat, also to Broadcasting and Hansard. I now declare this public hearing closed.